So I'm going to call our meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Ojai Planning Commission for Wednesday, November 15th. Members of the public wishing to address the Planning Commission on items appearing on the agenda are requested to complete a speaker's card and file it with the secretary prior to the start of the meeting. Cards are available in the lobby. Speakers should state their name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Comments must be directed to the commission, not the audience. While Planning Commission is in session, all in attendance are expected to maintain order and decorum and to obey the orders of the chair. Could we have roll call, please?
Chair Merck.
Here.
Vice Chair Quillisi.
Here.
Commissioners Nolan.
Here.
Jagiello.
Here.
Corbin.
Here.
Zabilla.
Here.
Powers.
Here.
Let's see. Commissioner Quillisi, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excuse me. Thank you. Public communications is the time set aside during the Planning Commission meeting for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on items of city business other than scheduled agenda items. Matters raised at this time may be briefly discussed by the Commission and will generally be referred to staff and/or placed on a subsequent agenda. Under state law, other than for emergency items, no action can be taken at this meeting. Is there anyone who would like to speak on something not on the agenda? Mr. Miley, this is an opportunity for you, you know. You could just, you could talk about anything you want to talk about. Thank you. I have been advised our city council liaison, Mr. Wyrick, has been held up in traffic, but he will be here later on this evening. We'll move on to our consent items. All matters listed on the consent calendar are to be considered routine by the governing bodies and will be enacted by one motion in the form listed. There will be no discussion of these items unless before the governing body votes on the motion to adopt. Specific items are removed from the consent calendar for separate motions. So we have two items, the minutes of the regular meeting of the October 4th and the minutes of the regular meeting of October 18th. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve these?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of the regular meeting of Planning Commission October 4th, 2017.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second that. Was this just for the first meeting?
The first one, October 4th. All right. Could we have a roll call, please?
Nolan.
Yes.
Jagiello.
Yeah.
Corbin.
Yes.
Quillisi.
Yes.
Merck.
Yes.
Zabilla.
Yes.
Powers.
Yes.
All right. How about the next one?
I'll make a motion we approve the minutes of the regular meeting of Planning Commission October 18th, 2017.
All right. Mr. Quillisi, you want to second that?
Sure, I'll second that.
All right. Okay. Could we have a roll call for that one, please?
Nolan.
Yes.
Jagiello. Corbin.
Yes.
Quillisi.
Yes.
Merck.
Yes.
Zabilla.
Yes.
Powers.
Yes.
Okay. Next is disclosure of site visits and ex parte contacts. Could we start with Commissioner Nolan over here? Ex parte contacts?
I did visit the site and had no ex parte contacts for the discussion item.
I visited the site, had no ex parte contact.
Mr. Corbin?
Sorry, I didn't have this in my packet, so I got sidetracked looking at Chester's. I visited the site, had no ex parte contacts.
I visited the site, had no ex parte contacts.
Commissioner Isabella?
I visited the site and had no ex parte contract.
I visited the site, had no ex parte contacts.
And I've spent years sitting in Seafresh admiring this site, and I've had no ex parte contacts, but I'm very excited for this meeting tonight. The one item we have for tonight is a discussion item, a concept review, CR 1705, for a mixed-use residential commercial project in a C1 zone at 601 East Ojai Avenue. Could we hear from staff on this, please?
Yes, thank you, and good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. This concerns conceptual review for mixed-use project, as you indicated. It's 601 East Ojai Avenue, specifically the southeast corner of Ojai Avenue and Bald Street. The applicant is Mark Whitman on behalf of Fred Plotke. The property in question is zoned and designated both in the general plan and through zoning for general commercial uses. The proposal is to construct a mixed-use project on the site, which would have orientation to Ojai Avenue and access from Bald Street. The ground floor uses would be oriented towards retail or office uses along Ojai Avenue, and towards the rear of the site, as oriented to Bald Street, the ground floor would provide for live-work units. On the second floor would be apartment units, and therefore, that constitutes the mixed-use component of the project. Because the property is designated and zoned for general commercial uses, residential uses are specifically not permitted in that zone. Therefore, we've spent the last couple of months in discussions with Mr. Whitman, as well as the city attorney, and monitoring pending legislation to determine various paths that might allow for consideration of a mixed-use project here. So there are actually a couple of paths that could be considered, and I'll go through them and discuss with you the recommended path for the project should the commission endorse it and ultimately make a recommendation to the city council. Mr. Whitman is present and can speak to the plan itself and what the proposal is, but I'll talk more about the policy issues that are in play here. First of all, since the property is zoned general commercial, as I indicated, residential uses are not permitted. Therefore, any path that this project follows to permit mixed-use development would require a general plan amendment and a rezoning. The first path would be to rezone the property to VMU, Village Mixed Use. Property to the west of this, across Bald Avenue, is so zoned. So it would be appropriate to extend that designation, both from a general plan and zoning standpoint, further east along Ojai Avenue. So the property would be rezoned and redesignated to Village Mixed Use through a zone change and a general plan amendment to the land use element of the general plan. The path that we actually are recommending would be to amend the housing element of the general plan, as well as the zoning ordinance as it applies to the SPL district overlay. That is a special housing overlay, which allows affordable and encourages and enables affordable housing projects. And in fact, in the zoning ordinance, section 10-2.704 specifically enables consideration of mixed-use projects. There is actually a conflict, and we provided with you in a memorandum this evening from Jay Higgins, our principal planner. There's actually a difference in language between the general plan and the zoning ordinance as it addresses the SPL district. The zoning ordinance speaks to low and moderate income households. The general plan addresses very low and low. That's correct. So that's an issue that will have to be resolved. But that is a path that we think it would most favorably benefit the project and the process here. There are actually other considerations that could be applied. There is a density bonus section of the ordinance that could be applied here. We don't think that is. We think that's a more difficult row to hoe. And also, we were monitoring legislation that was signed by the governor earlier this year, this summer. That would allow mixed-use developments to be considered for residentially zoned property. However, it wasn't the reverse wasn't true. It didn't enable residential uses on commercial zones where they were otherwise prohibited. It worked the other way around. It enabled and allowed commercial uses on residential zoned property where commercial wasn't wasn't permitted. So I hope I haven't confused you there, but our recommendation is that we think this project is worthy of further consideration. We think it's consistent with the adjacent land uses and the downtown extension of the downtown mixed-use area. And we think that the amendment to the general plan and zoning ordinance through the special housing overlay is the approach to be taken here. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have regarding the processing or the strategic issues. And again, Mr. Whitman is here to answer questions you have regarding the project proposal itself.
Thank you. Do we have questions for staff? Yes.
Hi, Matt. If we amend the general plan and the housing element, does the project need to come before the planning commission as a DRP as well?
Yes, it would.
Okay.
And I might point out that there is a similar situation, if you will. The bowling alley property has a SPL overlay on it. So this approach would be similar to what was anticipated apparently with the bowling alley property as a residential opportunity there as well. It doesn't require residential mixed use. Both the ordinance and the general plan allow strict commercial uses on both properties, but the SPL overlay allows consideration of residential uses as well.
Okay. Other questions for staff?
Yeah.
Mr. Quillisi?
I may have misheard. I thought you said the property directly to the west is VMU, and I think it's the property directly to the south that's VMU. I don't think there's anything along Ojai Avenue right now that is other than C1.
Oh, yes, you're
Okay.
absolutely right.
That's fine.
That is
That's fine.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the property to the north, across Ojai Avenue.
And
Is that
across
not correct?
Ojai Avenue, it's all still commercial,
Right.
both
That's
sides
right.
of the street. At least out, what, as far as Whispering Oaks or so?
Yeah, the first tier along Ojai Avenue is C1.
It's all
Generally,
C1,
that first
right.
tier of properties, and it's the next tier below to the south that is VMU, correct?
I see.
I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner
Mis-
Zilla.
Mr. Winiger, if the general plan is amended that way, does the whole housing element has to be recertified through HCD?
No, it does not. You can amend the housing element without having to go back through the certification process.
But doesn't the housing element, by definition, amend the general plan?
Yes, it is. It's an element of the general plan.
Right, but so then doesn't it have to be recertified if it's been amended?
No, it does not.
Doesn't?
No.
Okay.
Other questions for staff? Anybody?
I-
Oh,
Just,
I want to correct myself in respect to the question that Commissioner Zabilla asked. If there was an amendment to the housing element which reduced the affordable housing opportunities, that may require recertification. In this case, you would be actually adding to the affordable housing opportunities. The SPL sites are actually enumerated in both the housing element and the ordinance. So you'd be, in this case, adding an opportunity. That would not require a recertification, but if you were to reduce it, that would require that would be a problem. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Mr. Corbin.
I have two questions. How and why were the VMU districts determined? And the second question is, how are the housing overlay areas determined?
That's a long answer.
And I'm going to yield to the chair
Thank you.
because I'm sure he has much.
back.
Yes.
The VMU was actually in place before I joined the commission, which is, it was put in place about 20 years ago. The idea was to encourage, live-work situations, but there was an attempt to apply it in a kind of rational way, but you can see a lot of instances where it's kind of arbitrary, whether it's VMU or commercial. With the SPLs, the last time we worked on the housing element, we went through a lot of work looking at all the available sites in downtown and where could we possibly put denser housing. And we just picked what we thought were the most likely sites that would be developed, and that's where we put the SPLs. But it was fairly arbitrary there again. There wasn't really a scientific way of doing it. We just sort of looked at it and said, these look like good locations, let's try it there.
Did the planning commission do that?
Yeah, well, it was a subcommittee that was the housing element
Chair.
group. Yes, ma'am.
Also, one more point was people who owned those sites advocated for it as well.
That's true, they did. Yeah, we had a number of owners that wanted to have the SPL on their property. Yes,
One
ma'am.
more question. In terms of procedurally of one path or the other for the applicant, is one a lot more complicated than the other?
No, they're pretty much identical in terms of the procedures that would have to go through. It'd have to go through the planning commission, review and recommendation to the city council regardless of which path was taken.
Other questions for staff? Mr. Quilisi?
Thank you. I understand that you are advocating a housing element amendment as the easiest path to make this project legal. What is it about rezoning that is harder than an amendment to the housing element?
The process it would have to go through actually would be perhaps more complicated with that because you would have to rezone it to VMU, most likely. And then they would have to apply for a density bonus situation. So it's really, there'd be an extra step in that process. And the density bonus provisions would apply. Those have different standards. And I don't think they're as applicable to, are as friendly or consistent with a mixed-use proposal as is the SPL proposal. And I think that that's why the I'm guessing, the chair might offer something, but I'm guessing that's why the SPL was applied to the commercial properties rather than looking at a mixed-use sort of designation.
Okay, and do you have, since we're now talking about very low, and moderate income households, I know those are legal terms that
Yes.
that are based on average or median or something income in the area. Do you have handy numbers that tell us what those income levels are and what the rents have to be to qualify for very low or moderate?
I don't have the rents. I believe that very low is 60% of the area median income. Very low is 80% and moderate is 100%.
Moderate is the median.
Correct.
Okay, and then 80 and 60, okay.
Yes. And I don't know what that translates into rents offhand.
Or the income levels, for that matter.
Correct. I think the countywide median income level is around 80,000, something like that.
I don't think it's that high.
Is it not that high?
It's about 69, 70.
60, okay.
Six-
So
no,
then
it's
we're-
about
We're talking
65,
slightly under
69.
50 for low and slightly over 35 for very low,
Well, I mean,
at
It's
80
a
and
v-
60% of 60,000.
well, it's a little more complicated than that. I think there's another step to it, but it's all a formula, it's all out there.
Right.
And that was obviously be something we would want to see far more fleshed out, is what the path is to get there.
And the ordinance does require that the city and the applicant, the property owner, enter into an affordable housing agreement. It's a 55-year agreement, and that would set out both the exact percentages of the various income categories, as well as what those translate into in terms of rentals. And it also requires annual reporting for consistency
Okay,
and compliance.
okay.
Yeah, there's a pretty detailed explanation of that in the housing element, I believe, because we had to define what those levels were in there. Well, yeah,
Matt, I'm curious if in the past there have been projects that have been granted waivers to traffic impacts?
Not that I'm aware of. Doesn't mean there haven't been, but I'm not aware of them.
Are you aware of any, Chair?
no, the county requirement that there not be any impact on the Edison curve, basically, sets the traffic standards for everything. So you can tell me otherwise if you want. That's my understanding. So can we hear from the applicant? Yeah, thank you.
Well, the answer raised, it's my understanding that the city council has, they have, overriding considerations for any project. And so they can waive the.
They make the rules.
Yeah, they can say this is an overriding consideration, such as affordable housing or senior housing. I think that there's a list of different projects that they consider to be exempt from, their traffic impacts. And so, but it's their decision ultimately. Here representing Mr. Plotke, and also he has a partner, Gary it's hard to pronounce, Kanapur, and he's been mostly my contact, but they came to me asking me what, Fred Plotke has owned this lot for 20, 30 years, and he's had different proposals, mostly like strip commercial proposals that he's considered on this property. But they came to me and they said, "What can we do here? What will the city accept? And what do you think the city will accept? And why don't we come up with something that we'd like to develop this property?" And so I set about saying well, something that we really need and was talked about quite a bit is affordable housing. And so I think if you added an affordable housing element in the project, it'd be warmly received mostly. And so they said, well, how do we make money doing that? Because they looked at the affordable housing rates and go, well, if we can add a commercial, propose a commercial element to be part of that, where you could make money there. I think the affordable housing proposal is like a break-even proposal for any developer. I don't think anyone could do low income without getting HUD money or something like that. There's no way for a developer to make money, and so there's no reason for them to do a project. And so we have to consider their concerns too. They want to make some money, and so they're developers. They want to make money on the project, and it's my desire to create a piece of architecture that will enhance the community. And so I came up with a design with the commercial element and part of the housing element coming to the street, and adding a streetscape or even a street space, which I think is really important in communities. When you think about what feels good in a village or community, it's the space that you're in and the surrounding architecture. And so there's some structures right across the street that are right up to the sidewalk, and these, we're bringing a couple of units on this project right up to the sidewalk to create a street space that feels good. And when I think about Ojai and where our best street spaces, I would say in between the arcade and the post office, or between the arcade and the El Paseo building. Those are the spaces that when I'm in the street, those are the spaces I feel really good. And I think it's because of the 2 stories coming close to the sidewalk, and you go to Europe and other communities, and that's why those streets feel really good. But also, I'm thinking about what other communities that I think we could emulate. And one of them is Carmel. And if you walk around Carmel, there's all these amazing paseos that they have with artists and shops, down these paseos. And so I was trying to create that sort of feeling too, with on a limited basis, but paseos that would come in and out of the shops. And then there's one paseo that goes down the eastern property line that would have the live-work units that we're proposing along the ground floor, 4 live-work units on the ground floor and 8 affordable houses on the second story. And then there's the commercial. I think we have, up to 4,000 square foot commercial spaces. There could be offices as well, and then a little sidewalk cafe on the corner of Bald Street and Ojai Avenue, with a small, restaurant element that would be part of the project as well. The parking, we're not fully parked. We have, I think, 29 or 30 spaces kind of sketched out. Of course, the whole plan is sketchy at this point because we're just trying to get you guys, general feeling of the project. but I think we're required 40. And so we're asking for the exemption because we're right across the street from the park and ride, and we're asking for an exemption to the amount of parking as well. But along with that, we're providing bike storage and bike lockers, and for the residences, and maybe encourage other forms of transportation as well. I think Matt laid out the uniqueness of this proposal and needing a zone change or the housing overlay, which which the clients are willing to do. They're willing to go through that to see a great project. They're willing to take the time and do it right, and something that's good for everybody in the community. And of course, there's always going to be negative impacts to any project, and I think traffic is one of them. And we would be asking for a exemption to the Highway 33 traffic limitations, which is which hinders most developments here in Ojai, which actually I think is a good thing. And so I live here too, and I think having our slow growth policy, which we have in place, is a good thing. And we're growing at a slow rate, I think, and we should just choose and pick and choose and guide these folks who want to come forward with developments. We should guide them into making it right for the city. And of course, water is going to be a big issue for most everybody, and I think I'm working with some people who are looking for new sources of water here in the valley, and I know there's groups that are looking at getting state water, and so water is an issue, but we hope to find solutions to that. And so I think that's all I have to say for now, but any questions?
Thanks, Mark. Do we have any questions? Yeah, Chester?
Sure. Mark, how do you plan on incorporating the low-income housing, and where do you see that going? The low or moderate, middle?
Moderate,
low,
yeah.
Moderate.
Well,
and give me
yeah.
an idea what that means to you. Like, what kind of rents are you talking about?
Well, this is a document that was produced by the former planner, but I was the rental rates have been dictated as a law firm that was hired by the city, and they came up with these rates, and so the owners are accepting the rates, and so we're proposing 1-bedroom moderate income units, and they're dictating that at $2,200 a month
For a one-bedroom?
for 1 bedroom. Yeah,
Wow. That's
And that's moderate?
that's moderate. Yes,
moderate, okay.
is that right?
And do you have a two-bedroom unit there?
Yeah, there's a 2-bedroom in here. Yeah, for 22. Wait, I'm sorry. The 2-bedroom was 22. The 1-bedroom was 1,900, and the studio was 1,700. Do you want it? Sherry has a copy. She's the one who sent me this, so she can send everybody this.
Good, no,
is it-
that's what I wanted, to get an idea where it was going, yeah.
Yeah.
That helps a lot.
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just point out that whole affordability issue is going to require a lot more investigation. The ordinance, both the ordinance and the general plan use the word "and," so I don't think it can be one category exclusively. I think the intent was to have a mix of income categories there. Now, whether or not it's low, very low, and moderate, or just low and moderate is yet to be determined, but that's going to require more investigation.
I think we specified some percentages in that SPL thing.
There were,
Yeah,
The SPL.
yes.
yeah. Okay,
Um,
other question? Mr. Quilty?
Are all of the residential units intended to be rentals? That is, the owners of the property will remain landlords for the entire property?
Yeah, there's no plans of condoizing the project and selling them off now.
Okay.
Yeah, just
So then the live-work units will be leased out by the same person who's going to qualify for a moderate, low-income housing?
I think so. I think in order for that to be a residential
Okay.
unit.
And then they're gonna also be, it's kind of like counterintuitive to me a little bit, because, low income and then someone who owns a business, kind of, yeah.
Sure.
So you
yeah.
see, yeah, so you're renting to someone who owns a business on a low income level, and if they own a business, then, how do they really qualify as low income? And I could see that some businesses, people make a lot less, but that part of it, I'm a little
Yeah, I'm not sure.
confused on how
I'm
that,
confused.
how that would work.
I agree,
Yeah,
it is confusing, yeah.
Mark, are you suggesting that 100% of the residential units are going to fall under an affordability category?
Well, it was our intention that it would stay in the moderate range. If you go into the low income range, it's going to be really hard to make this project pencil out. I'm proposing something architecturally attractive that's going to be, enhance the city architecturally. So you start, lowering the profit level for the owners.
I get it.
And so they're,
So why wouldn't they, so let's say that were it to be possible, which doesn't sound like it is, but were it to be possible, are you suggesting that the applicants are agreeable to making all the residential units
yes.
moderately affordable by the
yes.
legal definition and indenture it that way?
I told them they had to, yeah, and
Okay.
they agreed to that.
So
yes.
why wouldn't they just present that? I mean, because ultimately, this has very significant land use implications. It sets a big precedent. It's a huge windfall for the developer to, get such a bonus, and all of the stuff that you guys are suggesting, you're asking for, like to be traffic and parking waived. Why wouldn't you come forward with more details of how you're going to do it and really show what's in it for the city and the community?
Yeah, as the project develops, we can definitely do that. But right now, we're just saying we're going to be affordable, and we hope that offsets, the commercial, the environmental impacts of the commercial aspect of the project.
There are 7 or 8 residential units here?
12.
Oh, 12,
altogether.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Four live work, yeah.
12, all right. The SPL, I think, says 15% very low, 15% low, 5% moderate. Presumably, the other 65% could be market rate. Is that the implication of the ordinance in your opinion, Mr. Winiger?
Well, that was the idea of the SPL overlay.
I'm sorry?
That was the whole concept of the SPL overlay.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe that's the case, and it also says that exceptions may be granted at the sole discretion of city council, so.
Everything's at the discretion of the city council. But my point is that there could be very low and low income
And
housing.
that formula that
if
my
part of
clients-
it is
yeah,
also market rate.
My clients would be very happy with that formula.
Yeah,
So,
right, I was thinking that formula could work.
Yeah, definitely, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I would suggest you do your math, because getting something like that, making sure that those people actually do qualify and can do it, and that it makes sense economically. It may be a little more
Right.
complicated
It's
than
more
that.
complex
Yeah,
economically.
it's a lot more,
certainly.
and financing and things like that, and, if they stay rentals, that's one thing, but, I think that's the biggest problem with these projects, is you get to a point and you get to that place where you cannot find the people who can do, afford what is there, and then you have people who don't want to do the market rate because you have this other element here that is a bit of, it's complicated, and, so.
All right, other comments? Anybody? Great.
This might be a non sequitur, and I apologize if it is. But it's popping into my head is the Wave Complex in Ventura. Does anyone know about that? That's affordable housing, right? Aren't the rental rates low, and it's like an artist community? Do you have any?
It was hugely
Not all
city.
low.
It was city
Don't think.
financed, I think, the city.
That was a redevelopment project and it used a mosaic of different funding sources to provide the affordability, but it is I believe, 100% affordability restricted project.
Subsidized, but all affordable.
That's the work-live units down, right, yeah.
Yeah.
And the one objection I have to those is, and that's where I was getting to the point where having a low-income housing person qualify as a business owner, because if you look at most of those units, they're their window fronts are full of their storage.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the last thing we'd want, right, is to look at the
Mhm.
window front.
So
of
we're
a
looking
work-
for
you know.
unsuccessful business owners.
Yeah, they like the idea, they get in there and they just put their stuff in
I
there.
think Ojai is
Yeah.
full of those.
Yeah.
Well, I was just curious if the Wave was a model that was a working what the model was.
Yeah.
If there's some, I'm just seeing an empty lot. I know there's a lot of creatives have needed to move out of Ojai. What was the model that was used down there? Can it be applied somehow to this? That's where my mind went.
Yes, Commissioner Corbin.
Well, I personally would like to see more housing go down that end of Ojai Avenue. I think it's probably a more town-friendly kind of use of the property. Retail is questionable these days. We probably have enough coffee shops here, and I really think that housing would be something that we definitely need. I'd love to see village mixed use extended, or however it gets done, a housing overlay. I think it would also perhaps give some more life to the street at night. I agree with Chester. If you look at most of the retail components they're not affordable, but the housing units, you built one, and there's one on Montgomery Street that Paul Quimby built. They're really not used as retail. It's maybe the idea it's going to be somebody's office, but then it's not very street-friendly kind of use. I would be happier just to see housing with some wonderful outdoor spaces that give life to the street.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Nolan.
Question, and this is about the 4 live-work units. So are they actually 2 separate units, meaning there's the live,
No.
it's a combination?
Well, again, the
I mean, a
plan,
separation?
the plan is very sketchy.
Yeah,
But it would be like a front, den or space that would face
Okay.
the Paseo. And the back would be a living unit,
All
a
right.
studio unit.
so basically the rent would be, you would be paying rent for live work, not a live and a work.
Not right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. But I also wanted to comment about having the street frontage. I actually like what you've done about bringing it, some of the units up to the street and the scale, but then by creating those courtyards, I think that's really a nice element. So architecturally, I like what you're doing.
Thank you.
And I think it's going to be, if it goes through, it's going to be a great project there. But then, of course, there's a lot of questions as we've discussed about how the housing's going to work and what have you. But overall, and I think, where you've got the parking located, I guess that'll be something to further flesh out about the 10 spaces, but you're within 500 feet of the public parking.
250 feet, yeah.
Yeah, and then, the hope is that if somebody, at least in the live-work units, would not be driving as much, you have the bike parking, maybe electric,
Mm-hmm.
something you could hook up to. And then, we were talking earlier about, who potentially would be going into the live work. But I'm guessing, if you had a moderate income unit, that person may in fact own a business and be able to do a combination. So, I'm not opposed to that at all. I think it's something to look at. So, thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. I would like to hear from the public. I've got a couple of speakers cards, so thank you, Mark. Sasha Wolf.
Well, I guess I should come up to the microphone, huh?
Yeah.
I don't want to take too much time here, but I have lived in that neighborhood just right across the street almost since 1990, and I really appreciate I don't like the newspaper, and everybody else calls it a vacant lot or an empty lot, and to me it's open space. And, the view of the Topa Topas and Chief Peak, and different times of the year. technology defeated me. I tried to bring photos I had taken over the seasons to show you, but it was a no-go. So let me just describe it. The snow on the Topa-Topas, the pink moment, and that lot, when in the spring, there's wildflowers growing there and weeds, but these are beautiful weeds. If you look at them closely, you'll appreciate them. And the rain can soak in. And Joni Mitchell's song comes to mind. They paved over paradise. Well, I wouldn't say Ojai's paradise. I wouldn't go that far. But the open space gives a sense of space and a sense of place, I think. So to have any kind of building on there is kind of rough to the spirit, I think, a little bit. The angles and the concrete and all that kind of stuff. And I just might mention that I had a little garden going there some years back, very tiny little space. And the cabbage was it's like you grow your own, and you harvest it and you can't, wow, you still remember it years and years later how that cabbage tasted. It had a crispiness to it, a juiciness to it you can't find in the store. Okay, I'm going to go off a little bit, and something I found in this Time magazine, this particular issue right here, which is, whatever, the French leader on it. The next leader of Europe, it says, okay. And it has to do with opioid use. It's shocking. And I understand that Ojai is no exception, that there's an epidemic of opioid use here in Ojai. So I see this space as a potential for use by homeless people for a garden space, for a community garden. There are able-bodied, healthy, in some way, physically healthy, well, they're struggling, men and women, mostly men, that come to the CAP office, Community Assistance Program office, on a daily basis in the mornings, Monday through Friday, to get a little brown bag full of a lunch bag. I can see where horticultural therapy would come in very handy here, if to have space as a garden. Sorry. And there are people here in Ojai that have been involved, they could be teachers with this, with community gardens in San Francisco and in Berkeley, and there's probably others that I don't know about, and I'm so happy to see that a lot of the schools like Topa-Topa, Miners Oaks, Miramonte, are actually asking for volunteers to work with the children to garden. I think that's very important for the future. I don't know, well, anyway, I think maybe I've said enough, except maybe some statistics here. 63% is the percentage of drug overdose deaths in the U.S. that are the result of opioids. And I think, I think from reading this article, it's like people get addicted because they're so stressed out. And even as young children, they're born with some kind of a physical defect and they get bullied in school. And I can see maybe so that leads to, big problems later on down, high school, junior high. But I can see if they're working with other kids in a garden growing things, maybe there wouldn't be such a focus on them and what they, how they appear, their appearance or how they act. But, just a community effort of growing your own. Oh my gosh, this carrot tastes really great. So you just pull it right out of the soil and, they probably don't even rinse it and eat it right away. So I think I've said what I wanted to say about that. The use for that space is how I imagine it, and to keep it as open space. That's it. Thank you,
Sasha. It's been nice having you here. Thank you. I have a card from Jeff Weinstein.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Weinstein. I'm a local architect, and I live at 353 Montana Road in Ojai. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. I'm speaking to the Planning Commission in full support of the proposed project at the southeast corner of Bald Street and East Ojai Avenue. I have known Fred Plotke the owner of the property, after first writing him a letter about his lot on East Ojai Avenue in 2011 during the Great Recession. Our family had just moved to Ojai full-time, and we've owned a home here since 1998. Fred has also owned a home here in Ojai since 1983, nearly 35 years ago, when he built the 9-unit condo development at the northwest corner of Bristol Avenue and Ojai Avenue, opposite St. Andrew's Episcopal Church. Fred is my friend, so I am prejudiced, having known and worked with him the last 6 years, during which time he has proved to be an honorable, humble, and generous man, a person who keeps his commitments. Early on, Fred and I discussed a retail live-work project, more commercial in nature, but that changed with the death of brick-and-mortar retail. Later, in December of 2016, about 1 year ago, Fred and his partner Gary and we met with Kathleen Wold and Jay Higgins at City Hall to discuss a proposed mixed-use project with ground floor retail along Ojai Avenue and apartments behind, which are adjacent to the existing apartments on the next-door lot behind the property. But we received no encouragement from the past community development director to pursue a project with multifamily housing. As a landlord in the city, and by the way, I wanted to comment that I do have a 1-bedroom, 1-bath bungalow just a few blocks from the proposed project, where I do receive $2,050 a month rent. I don't have to tell you, housing opportunities in Ojai are a real challenge. Seniors have offered to pay me rent to park their trailer in my backyard. School attendance is dwindling due to families unable to find available housing, and City Hall appears to be doing nothing about it. Previously, Fred and I attended a City Hall meeting to offer his lot as a potential site for affordable housing to help the city meet its obligations to the state of California. This lot was included in the city's October 9th, 2012 Housing Element Update, as well as a 2005 vacant land inventory, but nothing came of those efforts. This project offers a way forward. Combining retail uses along Ojai Avenue, Fred and I have long hoped for a bagel shop on the corner, increased pedestrian access, and economic activity between C-Fresh and OBC, Ojai Beverage Company, and much-needed housing for working people, workforce housing it's often called, and seniors. This project is across the street from the city-owned parking and the adjacent long vacant lot alongside the skate park owned by Jim Miller, who from San Luis Obispo, who, despite having received City Hall approval to build a mixed-use project, which included housing, never moved forward. So this is not just a housing opportunity, a way to provide much-needed housing for the community, but also an opportunity to stimulate economic growth, create local jobs, and provide infill development in a measured and reasonable manner along East Ojai Avenue. I urge the Planning Commission to give a thumbs up to this worthy project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weinstein. Mr. Miley, I knew we'd hear from you sooner or later. Thank you.
For the record, my name is Bill Miley. I live on North Signal Street and have been here since 1968. And as most of you know, I have been involved in promoting affordable housing for the last 4 to 5 years. Notably, the big one from People's Self-Help Housing, which got shut down a couple of years ago. Okay. Number one, the need is obviously great and overwhelming. As a city, we haven't done much in the last 3 or 4 years, except for the accessory dwelling units that have been developed, permitted, and built, which is good. The location, from the standpoint of affordable housing, is perfect because there's access to the trolley, there's access to downtown retail, to services. You can walk around and enjoy yourself. It's perfect because it fits the national and state location requirements. It also is not receiving any tax dollars. It's not receiving any housing dollars. It's a private funding proposal, which is pretty exciting. I'm not sure how they're going to actually work it out so they're not going to lose money on it. But they're willing, my attitude was, these two gentlemen are willing to accept less from their financial investment in dollars because they're investing in the social community value of having housing for people that right now can't afford it. And that's a return in a different sense, which I think they deserve credit for proposing. Okay. The school district is suffering from, in my opinion, lack of families with kids. Here's an opportunity. Well, I don't know how many kids you can get into a one bedroom, but maybe you can put some dividers in there or something like that. And my thought on the school district is the school district is gradually dying. 10 years ago, it had 5,000. Now they have 2,500. What's going to happen in the future? House prices aren't coming down. I don't need to tell you folks what it costs to find a place, if you can find it. So I see this as providing probably workforce housing for people who, I don't know how you're going to select the applicants, but you know, that's an issue to talk about. But it sure would be nice to have the housing available for people who live in the valley that can't afford it, 40, 50% of their income's going for, or travel here and work here and have to live someplace else. So I right now think this is a really good proposal. It needs to be detailed out, as you have said, and you folks have asked. And I sure support it at this point. Not that I have a vote, but I like it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miley. This is a public hearing. Does anybody else want to speak? All right. I don't know that we need to close the public hearing, but I think we'll move on. So this is a concept review, so we'll just kind of go around the table and give you our thoughts. So why don't we start with Commissioner Powers on my left here?
Let's not start with me.
Oh, okay. Let's start at the other end. Let's start with Commissioner Nolan.
Well, generally, I'm in favor of the project, and of course, it needs more detail, as Mr. Marley and several of us have commented on. But I'm hoping to see you come back and see what you come up with.
I do like the architectural elements of the property. I think that would look amazing here in Ojai and create a very unique kind of village courtyard experience, shopping experience. I think your challenge is going to be meeting the affordable housing goal, because I think if someone's going to be granted those kinds of permissions from the city council to go this route, there have to be a significant benefit, I would think. And so I think you have enough information there. It's really a math question, and see if it all pencils out. If it does, I support the project.
Commissioner Corbin?
I agree. I think it's potentially a great project. I like the idea that it's the scale of it and the sort of density of it and how it relates to the street. I don't know if you're going to have to be a little more creative in terms of how you build it to make it affordable, or, you know, they do a lot of fundraising in Santa Barbara for affordable housing, and I don't know what the options are for that here, but we sure do need it. So I'd like to see it proceed.
Commissioner Quilisi?
Thank you. As a commission, we have lately considered and reconsidered the East Ojai Avenue design guidelines. I went through them in some detail over the past week since we received this packet, and thank you to staff for providing the packet ahead of the usual Friday or so delivery time. That made it a lot easier to review. But I have been through the East Ojai Avenue design guidelines in some detail, and it sounds like they were written with a project like this in mind, in terms of scale, in terms of providing a transition to properties farther out East Ojai Avenue. Preserving, it talks to a future character that encourages the development of visitor serving uses as well as uses that serve the everyday needs of local residents, develop a more pedestrian-friendly atmosphere with a mix of uses that supports a highly walkable environment, and it's certainly walkable from that area. My wife and I live up that way near the Presbyterian Church, and we walk down to the American Legion Hall on a regular basis, or businesses in that area, and it's a very nice walk. It talks about eclectic character. It just time and time again, it looks to me like this project fits perfectly with the design guidelines. The one fly in the ointment is that it has a residential aspect to it, and that's not currently permitted in commercial property. And I would favor going forward with the project and taking whatever is the easiest route to make it possible to have a residential aspect to this development, because I think it would be a boon to the community. And noting that the 15-15-5 percentages of very low, low, and moderate housing are the requirements, so that's like one unit of very low and one of low and probably one of moderate, and the rest being at market rates, ought to make the financing of the project a lot easier. Now, the more that you have very low and moderate housing offered within there, the more likely it is, I think, that the city council would consider waivers of the other things that you need to make the project go. But I would personally be in favor of doing all of those, because I think this would be a terrific thing for that part of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quilisi. Commissioner Isabella?
Well, exactly as Commissioner Quilisi outlined is my concern, that we would be giving a giant boon to this person, this applicant, by rezoning this land, making 3 units affordable, and giving them 100% more than what they would ordinarily be entitled to. And they get a huge windfall. There's 2 or 3 units that are designated affordable, and then really what does the community get? We get a ton of parking. We don't have enough parking for the project, so all those people go on the street, on a street that's already going to be extremely congested. Bald has 2 major projects. One's built, another's going to be built. Those people were already complaining about their kids trying to get to the school bus and, feeling afraid for the number of cars already on the street, and then the traffic impacts as well. So I definitely think we need to see the meat on the bone on this and really make a very clear decision what the community gets out of this before we start trading off all of these, issues. Mr. Miley's pointing out that, he's making the supposition that, the developer, the applicant's doing this, as a community mindedness. Well, I'd like to see the proof of that, because to rezone this property is, to me, a financial boon to them. And I'd like to see what the city gets back in terms of real affordable housing.
They're proposing 12 affordable units.
That's,
No.
well, let's see what's written down. Let's see what actually comes before a commission and what's real, because I think that word is really, the affordable word is thrown around a lot. But it could be just a % of the project that's affordable and not all the project. And I think that's where we need to be mindful and keep our eye on what happens.
Thank you. Commissioner Powers, do you feel like chiming in at this point?
Yeah, I think it is important to serve everyone that's involved. So, serve the developer and serve the community and serve those that need affordable housing. And that's the challenge, is to meet all those goals, so it's equanimous across the board. Otherwise, I can see the potential of this project being very out of balance, where there are, 3 affordable units in the restaurant market rate. And then, then it's not really an affordable, housing project. Mark, everything you design is gorgeous. I mean, it's a gorgeous rendering. It's a gorgeous looking project. Personally, given how much focus there is on, and I know there's lots of details to be filled in, there's so much conversation about water conservation, land management, all the environmental things, energy, alternative energy, how to say if the city saves money on that, all these conversations happening. And I'm just dying to see someone of your skill level come up outside the box with a project that is truly a green project with living roofs and water recycling and materials that may not be so expensive, so your profit margin can be, you can make profit, but you're not doing stick buildings and stucco that you're, modular or those big foam things. I'm not I just read about this stuff, like all the things there are to build with these days to make gorgeous projects that are more cost effective. And I'm just waiting for someone to jump in and set a precedent in the city to make the city a model, create a model project across the board. And I see so much talent, yet I see really kind of linear, old school, and that's not a bad thing because it's what we know. But we're such a progressive community in so many ways, philosophically and creatively, and yet I just don't see, for me, enough. I don't see us living in our potential given the talent we have. And whenever I see a blank lot from the ground floor up being built, or there be a house or a commercial place, I'm just like, okay, here's another opportunity. Are we going to jump on this to create a model project? So that's not to say this one's not gorgeous. It is. I don't see you often, so I'm just want to put that out. What's that? Yes, well, and that's the thing, of course, there's research, what grants, what incentives, what, kinds of things are happening when you implement these. I get it's a bigger conversation, but it's not an impossible conversation. I would love to see electric cars, charging statements, electric car charging stations built in. I guess you can see where I go with my thinking is there's these other conversations happening within city council and within the community. So these projects aren't kind of like isolated instances. They're within larger conversations. They're already happening. So can we implement, whatever our commission looks at? Can we take all those conversations that are happening within the city in mind when we're looking at projects? If that's the direction as a whole the community wants to go, and so we can fulfill the community desire as well as an individual developer's desire.
Thank you. I'll just say, you've noticed from all the comments here, we're really excited to have an opportunity for more housing in Ojai. So I think the plans outlined by Mr. Winninger are probably the best bet in terms of getting that overlay and then changing the zoning and so on. I think we'd be very amenable to that at the planning commission level. I assume the city council would be as well, because I think there's a real opportunity to get more housing, and it's right where we need it. And so this is very exciting to me to see this come forward. I notice we're assigning a lot of parking to that park and ride area. A lot of people, oh yeah, there's the park and ride. But I've noticed lately it fills up really quickly. The skate park is really very popular, and all of a sudden, I don't know that we can count on that for parking, but that's a detail down the road. In general, this is very exciting. I hope you can work it all out. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. There might be some opportunity with the owner next door as well for parking. There's a lot of parking in the beverage company's parking lot. It's
Oh, yeah, that's a big parking lot there.
There's a
yeah.
big parking
There's
lot
a
there. yeah.
doctor's office there too, isn't there?
Yeah, but the back of it's all parking, and so I think
That all belongs to OBC?
Oh, I'm assuming so. Yeah, but there's a lot of parking back there that doesn't seems to be underutilized. So there might be an opportunity to do shared
More
parking.
thing to
there.
research.
Yeah, and then as far as the offsets and credits for, we probably can't do the straight SPL. There probably will be additional incentives for doing the commercial units on the property. And I think the next step would be to take it to the city council. They probably have will have more insight to that because they'll need to do the ultimate zone change. I think it needs to go to them on a concept level as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all your comments.
Yeah, thanks for bringing this forward. Okay, we're going to move on. Thank you all for your input and everything. Director decisions.
So, Mr. Chairman, you have a list of recent director decisions. Nothing notable there. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
Glad to see the Lions are going to be selling Christmas trees again this year.
Yes, indeed.
All right, and future agenda items?
Yes, for December 6th, we tentatively have identified 3. I think it's very likely you'll see the concept review items. We'll probably see all 3, but we're working on the concept review 1707. That is for the Topa Mountain Winery. That's related to additional parking for that. Probably the only questionable one here is probably the 310 East Aliso, and that's just a 1-unit addition to an existing bed and breakfast.
Could you say some more words about 1707? It
Yes,
says construct on a vacant parcel. Is Topa Mountain Winery buying some vacant property next to itself, putting parking there?
their proposal is to lease part of that lot there that's owned by the Ojai Valley Inn, directly next to them, and just put additional parking for events on that site.
That'll be interesting. Thank you. Committee reports, comments. Commissioner Powers, did you attend that city council meeting?
I did.
Thank you.
I mean, it was a long time ago already.
Yeah, it was a ways back.
It was October 24th, so a lot of water's been under the bridge. And some of the things spoken about then came back on the agenda last night, so it was further discussed. It almost seems like some of the things I have to say are somewhat moot and irrelevant. But I'll continue on if you'd like me to. But Commissioner Quillisi, is going to have updates on what I say because they had further discussions about the electric car charging stations last night, which supersedes what I have to say. So that was a question. Would you like me to
Sure. Well, just
report anyway?
let us know what they talked about anyway.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it simple. Some of it I didn't understand. Well, there's electric charging stations right outside here, and there seems to be call from the community to have more electric charging stations, and there was some concern of whether to dismantle the ones that are already out there and working because the lease or something is up on them, and putting in some new ones or keeping them there. And then it got put on the agenda for last night, so Commissioner Quillisi has an update on a charging station motion that came up last night at last night's city council. Mayor Johnson brought up a request to adopt a proposal about offshore drilling and fracking off the California coast, and there was a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Wyrick that passed to authorize the staff to forward a resolution to the U.S. Secretary of the Interior regarding that, on behalf of the city, I imagine. There was discussion about the city appealing the Ventura County Planning Commission for a permit a conditional use permit for existing oil and gas production on Creek Road. And there was a motion again put up by Mayor Pro Tem Wyrick to file an appeal by the Ventura County Planning Commission decision to grant that conditional CUP on Creek Road. And then there was also on the same issue a unanimously approved motion put forth by Mayor Pro Tem Ryrick to write a letter to the attorney to the Bentley Family Partnership as to their use in the CUP of the oil and gas drilling on Creek Road there. There was discussion about regulating certain aspects of the cultivation, use, dispensing, and delivery of cannabis. You might know that the CESP dispensary opened, and they're doing business now. This is one of the ones I wasn't quite sure what the whole conversation was about, but I believe it had to do with directing. There was a motion to direct staff to return to the city council a proposed fee schedule for cannabis business permits. And then there was also discussion about people having to make an appointment 24 hours in advance, and I think that was again discussed last night. So Commissioner Quillisi has an update on that as well. And then there was a discussion about a historic landmark designation at 700 San Antonio Street. It'd be historic landmark number 25. And again, Mayor Pro Tem Wyrick made a motion to approve the designation. And looks like that was passed as well.
The old Wilson property.
There was also a discussion about possible grant applications and interagency partnerships to pursue funding available through Proposition 1. The motion was passed to pursue grant applications of sustainable water management in the Ojai Valley. I'm looking at the minutes. That's where I'm getting this from, because one of the things I'm understanding, and it actually, on an aside, when Mayor Johnston was here and said, I'm not going to be a liaison anymore because I can just read this. Yeah, I can just watch it on YouTube, and which is what I do as well. And then I'm taking notes, on a 5-hour meeting, and then it's all in the minutes as well. So I'm curious about if we're being as efficient as we can with these kind of reports, given all the information is available.
That's a good point.
So like all these minutes are on the website.
Yeah.
And the community and public can read
I
the
agree.
minutes, and we can do the
I
minutes.
say we ban the habit of going to these meetings. I'm seriously, I think it's a waste of our time.
So that might be a discussion
we
for
just-
another
can we just
meeting
agree
unless
on
we
it?
want.
No, I think we can agree on it now.
I don't want to miss Mr. Quillisi's report, though. He's gone to a lot of effort to.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and not everyone has time to read it. I mean, even when we get emailed, like Jeff Weinstein's letter, I read it, but maybe all of you didn't get it in time, given your busy day, that you didn't read the letter, and, I get it. So sometimes but I just wanted to throw that out, because since Mayor Johnston made that statement, since then, whenever we're giving these reports, I'm thinking in my head, yeah, what he said kind of made sense, and I'm looking in the minutes and,
Yeah.
you know,
I have to say, the city website does a great job of
absolutely.
making all that stuff
It's
available.
phenomenal.
Absolutely.
So the resources are there. So I can continue if you want, but I did
Well,
want to, as a
maybe
side,
we're-
say that, because it
maybe
was a
we're
long
done with this
meeting
whole
and
phase
there's,
of our
you know.
operations. I don't know. I think everybody feel that way?
Personally, I don't gain a lot of value out of it. I
Yeah.
look at the notes. I review the websites when there's some things of interest. I go through scan it and get a bird's eye view of what's going on. And I just don't see the benefit of reiterating all that at our meetings.
You miss all the editorial comments by your fellow commissioners who attended those meetings.
That conversation
That
could
could be
still
good or bad.
happen, right?
Yeah.
Well, personally, I generally don't editorialize when I report, and the few times that I have, I just say what happened, because for me, it's not a forum for me to editorialize on the city council meeting, so,
Yeah.
or the MAC meeting, or what have you.
Yeah. I think when this whole tradition was started, there was much less communication, much less
Right.
information available.
Yep.
And we kind of needed to have somebody there to say, here's what's going on, but.
Right. Originally, or at least when I got on the commission, a representative from council would come and report, but then we found, we never knew exactly what was going on, and it was prior to all the recordings and what have you.
Yeah.
So our commission actually was the one that came up with, let's start going to the city council meetings, and then, of course, then the BAB, when we were already going to the MAC, and then the BAB got added on to it, so.
Yeah, the MAC is a kind of different thing, because there's
The
no.
MAC's different,
coverage of
exactly.
that, but-
But now with all the recordings
Yeah.
and the website, everything's, a lot of things are posted on there. Things are more accessible.
Good.
There
Is
might be.
Is
there
that something
might-
we could vote on and just say, we're not going to do this anymore, or is this?
Certainly, I think you can. I think I would prefer to place it on your next agenda as an action item.
Okay, that would be
I'll make a request
so moved.
that it would be put on our agenda for the next meeting,
Yeah.
Good idea.
if possible.
It takes at least two of us to put something on the agenda, or at least to ask for it, and I would ask for the same thing.
All right. Are you
I
going to
would-
be
I would s-
disappointed if you don't give your report tonight?
No,
All right.
doesn't matter.
I know they're very thorough, but.
We sat through it from 6 o'clock until 10 after midnight,
Uh-huh.
and that was pretty exciting,
Yeah.
in a masochistic sort of way. But I would suggest that while liaison to the city council and the building appeals board are probably functionally obsolete at this point because of all the communication that's available, the recordings and all, we do need to have somebody go to the MAC meeting. I would suggest that there are others where there are no recordings available. And so we might consider the OBGMA, we might consider the school board, and we might consider the Casitas Water Board and the Sanitary District Board. Because in all those cases, the only records that exist are, frankly, rather sketchy minutes. And unless you were at the meeting, you have no idea how accurate those minutes are. So that's just something for consideration when the topic comes up on a subsequent agenda.
Yeah, I do think it's important to have a representative at the MAC meeting.
Absolutely.
Just to let them
Yes.
know that we care about what they're doing, and,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah.
Commissioner Merck, one other point of order. Do we, or can we talk about the holiday schedule or the December schedule since
certainly
our
could,
second meeting
since we're looking
is
at agenda items and
December
everything.
20th? seems, I mean, I don't think that I'm going to be here.
Was Commissioner Quillisi going to report on last night's council meeting? I'm open.
It's all the same to me, folks.
I'm open for it.
I'm open
There were a
because
couple
we
of,
did it.
there were a couple of actions taken on land use items, and
And
perhaps you would want.
there were some updates to the topics that Commissioner Powers mentioned.
Yeah. I'd like to hear.
Okay. There was also a 6 o'clock meeting that was a joint Arts Commission City Council meeting. I don't know if that falls under this liaison thing, but what they came to there, it was a surprisingly substantive meeting, in my view. I wasn't expecting nearly so much, but they showed an architecture book project that someone on the commission has put together, which is a historical reference. They're going to have a launch party for actually bringing out the book, and it looks like it could be a really fine historical resource for the city. The Arts Commission is also asking for more money because they want to be able to store city art in the controlled environment at the museum, but they need a rolling rack to hold all this artwork, and that's $12,000, which wasn't in the budget. So City Council is pondering. As far as the regular City Council meeting, and I'll make this as brief as possible, they announced that the city's grant request to change out the yard maintenance equipment owned by the city, this was, I think, junking all of the gas-powered blowers and maybe others and getting battery-powered blowers, was approved by the APCD. So the city's going to get some money. The amount wasn't specified, but sometime in the future you can walk through the plaza and there will not be city employees there with gas-powered blowers, leaf blowers. And they also announced that Gold State Water had appealed at the last minute the court judgment on the theater. So that's going to go on for yesterday or the day before.
No, it was settled. They came back and they evidently.
Okay, well, that's news, since last night.
They
Yeah.
came back and they took $100,000 off the judgment, and I guess it's a done deal, is my understanding. That's what okay, that's not necessarily official, but that's what I heard through the
It was like the day before
grapevine.
yesterday was the deadline for filing an appeal, and they did.
Minutes before they
Yeah.
were.
And-
Today, Councilman Haney posted on social media that it got settled, and
Okay, great. Yeah, because it looked like it was going to go on for a while, and we might never get a theater again. A fellow named Connor Jones made a presentation on trees and the water cycle and made statements like trees cause rainfall. But it was very interesting about the stuff that's on the leaves and the transpiration from the trees, which we know the trees put water back into the air, but it also picks up stuff that's on the leaves that provides nuclei to stimulate rainfall. He says that's why when you see the low clouds, they're up along the mountains, because there's trees up there, or at least scrub or something up there, more than you might find down here in the middle of the city. The police chief and fire chief talked about the Vista burn. People talked about community choice energy programs. There's something going on in LA County right now where there is a county-owned utility that they claim lowers cost and wants to emphasize renewable energy, but has no legal requirement to do that. And the Los Angeles Community Choice Energy Program has invited Ventura County to join. It looks like this is something where, the utility or the electricity business has already been divided into generating companies and distribution companies. Sometimes they're combined, but very frequently they're separate companies. And this Community Choice Energy Program seems to be a distribution organization, and because it's community-owned or it's government-owned or something, it doesn't make a profit, so that's supposed to bring the cost down. Green Coalition, Ojai Valley Fire Safe Council, there were 9 or 10 different public communications things going on. As far as the electric vehicle charging stations, a slight update to what Commissioner Powers said. The charging stations that are out here across the street were paid for with other people's money, some kind of government grant. And the grant ran out. They used up all the money. That's why they're thinking of changing over. But the general philosophy, or the general business plan, I guess, is it costs $1 to charge your vehicle for an hour, which nobody seemed to think was a big deal. But some people said, well, if we don't give away that $1, then we're penalizing people with electric vehicles. So that's kind of where, there was no resolution of that. But they did have second reading and adoption of an ordinance that creates Title IX, Chapter 16 of the municipal code. And I would invite everyone to go read Title IX, Chapter 16. Then they talked about road rehabilitation, and this was one that kind of hit home for me. My little block of eucalyptus is scheduled to be paved this year. Okay. Mallory, which is the other piece that connects to my block, is not scheduled until the next cycle, which is 2019. And this was the time, of course, that Casitas decided to dig up both streets and put in a newer, bigger water main. So right now, eucalyptus is done. Mallory is still the land of steel plates on the road, and the people that live on Mallory are not happy about the thought that they might have to wait 2 more years with steel plates or whatever before they get some relief. And at Mr. Wyrick's recommendation, they pulled that item, which would have been approving the road rehabilitation project. It consisted of, we have to do some extra work that we didn't plan on, and so here's money that we'll pull from the capital improvement program to cover those costs. But my impression was that the council wants to take another look at that and maybe include paving Mallory at the same time and pulling some more money from somewhere to cover that. Trolley advertising, they approved a request for putting out an RFP for trolley advertising. The council approved the 334 East Ojai Avenue project that we recommended approval of. And that included the design review, the lot line adjustment, the development agreement, all of that. And it was all approved, reserving discussion of the tree removal and the green wall installation until further council consideration. So they're going to go ahead and do the land swap. They're going to let them start to develop the property as retail, but council wants to have more time to consider what to do with the trees. A lot of people were unhappy about the proposal that we approved that said take out the trees and put in this green wall. The tentative parcel map to subdivide 2 parcels at 712 Drown into 3 parcels was also approved with moderate changes from the applicant and from Don Theding. Drainage channel would be better than percolation. They said additional review and monitoring for cultural resources, and the council incorporated all of that in the motion that passed. There was a great deal of discussion about the medical marijuana, and the most of it was what Commissioner Powers referred to, the 24-hour delay in making appointments. This is apparently a unique provision, not just in the county, but pretty much anywhere, that you have to call, and then you can get an appointment 24 hours later to come to the dispensary or schedule a delivery from the delivery service. And my impression from the discussion was that City Council had inserted that requirement because, in an abundance of caution, they were concerned that opening even one dispensary or delivery service, much less 3 in Ojai, would cause a land rush like we haven't seen since Oklahoma, 110 years ago. And in fact, the one dispensary that's open, the proprietor, and Jeff Kroll, who's the proprietor of one dispensary that has not opened yet, have both said there's relatively little traffic, surprisingly little traffic. And they felt that this 24-hour thing was a real burden on the clientele because a lot of people are not aware of it. They'll drive 40 miles, come up here and say, I'd like to get some medical marijuana, and they have to say, I'm sorry, you can make an appointment, but you have to come back tomorrow and get it, if in fact we have a slot open tomorrow. Mayor Pro Tem Wyrick said, how about changing 24 hours to 3 hours? That failed. Council member Blatz said, why do we have any restriction at all? If you go to a pharmacy and you have a prescription and they have the product that you need, you can get it. And so a subsequent amendment or a substitute amendment or whatever or a substitute motion passed to remove all delays on appointments. You can drive up here, say, hi, do you have an appointment that I could take right now or an hour from now or whatever is open on your schedule? And that will now be legal at the currently 1 up to 3 dispensaries or delivery services. The fire department was back saying you got to adopt this ordinance 30 that pertains to chapter 9 of the building standards that has to do with sprinklers and a whole bunch of other stuff, both in residential and commercial properties, and incorporate restrictions that are more onerous than what is in the state code. That's what they want to do. The council declined to do that, voted 3-2 not to do that. And the BAB had voted 5-0 recommending not to do that. So that's where we are, and they didn't get to the rest of it. And they still adjourned at 10 after 12.
So that's it. Thank you.
It was a long night, but
Yes.
there's a lot of interesting stuff that went on too, so.
So Commissioner Zabilla's point is a good one. Regarding the holidays, I'm wondering if we could look at canceling our December 20th.
There's one more commission, there's
Really?
one more report. Well, we were going to say something about the sustainability.
That is on the list here.
Oh, it is. We're getting to it.
No, I skipped right over it. Also, complete streets.
I can do complete streets in a flash.
Okay.
Yes, the October meeting, basically, the one thing that we're working on right now is our Safe Sidewalk program, and it's about sidewalk infill. And I think I've mentioned this before, but briefly, we're looking throughout town, throughout the city, and looking at places where we can provide infill and any street improvements so that there's continuous access for pedestrians, ADA, and what have you. But we're pretty much concentrating on getting, especially to like downtown, to shopping, parks, and what have you.
Commercial and VMU areas primarily.
Yes. And then, of course, we talked about Ojai Day, which is come and gone, because this is from October 4th. And the other thing was creating future supplements for our master plan that was recently adopted. And basically what that means is there's other areas, projects that we can define further, develop that, we'd bring that to Planning Commission, run it by you, and if Planning Commission approved, then it would go to City Council, and then hopefully get adopted to be a supplement of the master plan. And the reason for doing that is down the road when funding is available, or grant funding and what have you, the more information that we have in our document, the easier it usually is to get funded, and would expedite the process of implementation. So that's that. Oh, and then one thing I just wanted to mention, if anyone has a chance, one of our projects is actually being installed on the bike lane on Bristol. What?
A
Yes.
bike lane on Bristol,
You know where the bike trail
path crosses.
goes through Bristol
yeah.
Avenue?
right?
If you have a chance, go over there. The hardscape's been poured. We're coming up with the planting plan right now, and that should be installed pretty quickly. But there's also some stormwater capture, and it's going to make it a lot safer for people on the trail and also for vehicle traffic and what have you. So anyway, just, if you have a minute, check it out.
One of the things that we have had at the Complete Streets things, though, at the Complete Streets meetings, is the almost complete disregard for the stop signs along the bike trail, so that automobile traffic, which is not required to stop at the trail,
Right.
comes close to killing bicyclists who aren't paying any attention.
Right. That's been a topic and an issue, which is, still ongoing.
Still has to be worked.
Exactly. And then I just wanted to say, we meet the first Wednesday of the month, so our next meeting will be December 6th. We meet here at City Hall at 2:30 to 5, and anyone's welcome to come and participate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Ray, can you be equally concise about the sustainability?
Oh, probably even more concise. Yeah, Commissioner Nolan may have some additions to what I say. Well, first off, our three-person committee is now two-person committee. Commissioner Jaglio has rescinded being on the committee. And then Kathy and I met anyway, and sort of what came up for us was, is our committee wanted and needed still? And we have the sustainability roadmap, which we were looking at, and we're going to update the entire thing. It's an initial, we've spoken about it before. It's a document created in 2008, but it definitely needs updating. But we're not really clear if it's something council really wants and needs and would refer to. Is it still relevant? Are a lot of the things on there already in motion, or the organizations in town vibrant and in motion as well? And so what we wanted to do was bring it to our commission here and see if everyone's on board for us to take it to council to see what do they want to do about the sustainability committee. Is it wanted and needed? Is this roadmap wanted and needed? Because we don't want to put all this work into something that won't be referred to. Is that?
That's a good explanation. And I just wanted to add on to that, because we had discussed two of our immediate topics to address would be, of course, water, and then the other one was fire. And I was contacted by some people in the community about the fire, and I've started to put some things together, but I can share that later. But basically what I was looking at was where in the city could we make some modifications to code enforcement, the tree protection ordinance. There were some other areas where I saw fire could be added in. And I also wanted to mention that when I was chairing the landscape committee and we worked on the modified water efficient landscape ordinance, we created a checklist and we included things like a fuel modification plan, things about invasive species. I know that it was never fully adopted. They took portions of that, and the city now is using that in their checklist, but not a lot of things were not used. And, and maybe Mr. Winiger, you might be able to respond to this. Personally, I was a landscape architect, not as a planning commissioner. I've done projects in Ventura County and LA County where if they're in a high fire zone, I've had to do fuel modification plans, and I haven't had the opportunity to do that within the city limits. But at the same time, I looked on the city website and trying to see, if that's required or if there's any guidelines for that, and I didn't come across it. No. So to me, and that pretty much has to do with permitted projects, where it would be triggered. But I think that's something that I have on my list of things that the city may want to look at. We should have that. And basically what a fuel modification plan is that when you're designing a landscape, you have, zones, starting at the structures, and you work your way out. Usually it's like 30 feet, then 100, and then further. But you can only do, you put low fuel volume plant material, like you don't have any laddering. Certain plant material can't be planted there, maybe certain types of irrigation. And then when you start getting into, like, say, the chaparral or naturally wooded areas, you actually have to create pathways and what have you to break up the fuel mass, and there's a whole, there are guidelines on how to clean it up and what have you. So that becomes part of your landscape submittal package. And, of course, the city would have to define, where would that be triggered, what high fire zone areas, et cetera. But I think, like I said, the county requires it, and I've done that personally. And I've done projects in LA County too, like in Malibu, for instance. So things like that are things that I'm recommending or putting on this list, and I'm happy to bring that back to the commission if that's something we think as a commission we want to take a look at.
And to clarify more, when I say take the sustainability committee to the council, it's actually doing a brief presentation for them, showing them this roadmap, the old version. Here's what we're working on. Is it wanted and needed? Does council want us to move forward, or are we a redundant committee? Because things are being addressed.
Question that needs to be asked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
But we needed the commission's blessing on that, because we're part of that.
Yes.
Yes?
You got it.
Would we ask you to get us on the agenda, or is that just something where we'd go for public comment?
I'll check in with the city manager.
And then let us know?
Yep.
Okay, good, thanks.
Yeah, the city council does a lot of accepting presentations that are both separate from the agenda and from the public communications. So that might be the easiest way to get in there and give them a short presentation. And you mentioned the gradations of what you need to do to be fire safe depend on the fire map. That's another topic that is being discussed emotionally and spiritedly right now all across the city government and the BAB and other places. And I think we're going to probably see some changes to the fire map because it has drastic financial implications for homeowners in the city. So.
All right, so the last remaining question is the December 20th meeting. We don't have anything on the agenda. And is there anyone that has a burning desire to meet then, or can we?
That means that we're going to have all four, well, because we have committed to that 3:45 to be on the 6th.
Mhm.
So that moves 4 items to the 6th. And I talked to someone today about the 3:10, and they were going to get back to us if they wanted to change over to the 20th.
That may be
Try to get it on, all 4 of them on the 6th.
but, well, we'll see. Which one's 3:45? Oh, right.
Winery,
Yeah.
or brewery, excuse me. So we're
Right,
gonna
that
have
should be on this
all
list
4.
too. So 3:45 East Ojai would be on the 6th as
On the
well.
6th,
So we'll
okay.
have 2
But-
DRPs and 2 CR.
We will see if we can't manage the agenda in order
Okay.
to not have a meeting on the 20th.
Sounds
Let's
like
leave it
we're
at that.
on you.
Yeah, that seems to be the sense of the
Is that you?
commission.
Good.
We could do that.
345 East Ojai Avenue?
We're 469.
That's the
Topoto Brewing Company,
Oh, that's west.
where the cleaners is.
Oh, where the cleaners is. Oh, sure, okay. Got it.
All right,
How about we decide to meet on the 6th and decide on the 6th whether to meet on the 20th?
well, that's
Because
another
the
possibility.
business, we may find that a bunch of the business from the 6th has to roll over and we don't want to hold up things.
Well, we may not have a quorum is the question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
due to the holidays.
Um,
You'll be absent,
Yeah.
okay.
That's an issue, but yeah, we don't have to decide anything tonight, but
Well, do
we'll find out at our
the
next meeting.
commissioners have a sense right now of whether they would be available to make a quorum on the 20th? I know I will be here.
I'll be here.
On what date?
On the
December
20th?
20th. Don't know now.
Okay.
Or, no, you won't be here?
No, I won't be.
Okay,
So we'll probably
that's
decide.
two
that.
down.
Yeah.
Decide on the 6th, but unless we have some more slippage, we probably will have a quorum for the 20th if we need to hear some cases. And if we don't, so much the better.
Yep. All right.
Right.
I understand Councilmember Wyrick was held up in traffic, and he's not going to be able to be here.
Apparently still held up.
Apparently still held up. So I'm going to close our meeting. Thank you all.